My name is Caleb. I'm 32 years old, and I never imagined I'd be sitting here telling the story of how my own family turned their backs on me over someone who wasn't even blood. I grew up in Austin, Texas, in a modest house that always smelled like my mom's cornbread and lemon-scented pine sol. I was the middle child between my older brother Marcus and my younger sister Lila. Growing up, I always thought we were close. Maybe not picture perfect, but close enough to believe we had each other's backs. Our dad worked construction most of his life, hard, calloused hands and silent dinners, while Mom worked as a school secretary and handled the emotional side of the house. If Marcus was the golden child, the football star, the one who got a full ride to college, then I was the fixer, the one they leaned on when things broke, emotionally or otherwise. I wasn't loud like Marcus or charming like Lila. I was just reliable. I stayed local after high school, worked as an HVAC technician, saved money, stayed out of trouble, and when Dad had his first heart attack at 59, it was me who took off work to drive him to appointments, who helped redo the insulation in their house when winters got rough, who fixed the goddamn washer at midnight because Mom didn't want to call a stranger. I thought that counted for something, but I started to notice the shift when Lila got engaged to Dean. Dean wasn't a bad guy, not at first. He had the smile, the handshake, the clean-cut look of someone who knew how to talk to parents. But something about him always felt calculated. He'd say the right thing, but you could tell he was measuring you while saying it. Still, I tried. I went to the engagement party, bought them a nice gift, even offered to install the AC unit in their new house for free. But Dean never looked me in the eye for more than 2 seconds. A year after their wedding, the cracks started to show. Lila would call me crying late at night. Fights about money, about Dean's temper, about how he hated that she still had so many opinions. She never said he hit her, but it got close. "He punched the wall again," she whispered once, voice shaking. "Caleb, it was 2 inches from my head." I told her to leave, told her I'd help her, that she could stay with me. She said she'd think about it. Then a week later, she stopped answering my calls. My mom said I was getting too involved. Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper when I brought it up. Marcus told me to stay in my lane. That was the beginning. Months went by, Lila stayed with Dean, and then came the baby announcement. Suddenly, the fights were forgotten, the tension erased. Everyone was thrilled. Baby showers, gender reveals, family dinners, and I noticed I wasn't being invited to half of it. "We thought you were busy," Mom said. "It was just a small thing," Lila texted. The worst was when I saw Dean's Instagram post of the family barbecue I hadn't been told about. My mom, my dad, Marcus, Lila with a baby bump, even Dean's sister and her kids. And me? Nothing. Like I didn't exist. I confronted Mom. Her smile was tight. "Caleb, you have to let things go. Dean's part of this family now." I said, "So I'm not?" She just sighed. That was the moment it started to click. They'd made a choice. Maybe it was easier to pretend nothing was wrong. Maybe Dean brought status. Maybe my quiet reliability was boring. But from that moment on, I knew I wasn't one of them anymore. Not really. And that was before things got worse. Before the will, before the hospital, before the betrayal that changed everything. The baby was born in early spring. A girl named Everly. I found out through a Facebook post. That was the kind of relationship I had with my family by then. Updates via filtered photos and comment sections. No phone call, no text. Just a smiling picture of Lila in a hospital gown with Dean standing behind her, holding their newborn like a trophy. I stared at the photo for a full minute before realizing my name wasn't tagged. My mother had commented, "So proud of you both," with 5 heart emojis. It felt like someone had erased me with a single backspace key. Still, I drove to the hospital that night with a gift in hand, a small elephant plushie, and a card that said, "Welcome to the world, Everly. Love, Uncle Caleb." I didn't want to hold on to anger. This was still my niece. Family, right? I got to the maternity floor and asked the nurse at the desk for Lila's room. She looked at her screen and said, "Sorry, I have instructions not to allow visitors for that room unless they're immediate family." I said, "I'm her brother." She looked at the list, frowned, and said,
Only the parents and siblings are approved. Your name's not listed. I called Mom. No answer. I called Lila. Straight to voicemail. I stood in the hallway for 20 minutes, holding a stuffed elephant and trying not to look like a freak. A janitor passed by and gave me that kind of half-pitying look you reserve for someone who's clearly not okay. I left the gift at the front desk and went home. The next morning, I saw Dean's Instagram story. Family only 100, with a photo of everyone in the room. Mom, Dad, Marcus, even Dean's damn cousin from out of town. No me. That was when I started to feel the kind of cold I didn't know existed. The kind that comes not from being alone, but from realizing the people you loved most didn't see you the same way anymore. Weeks passed. No one called to say thank you for the gift. No one acknowledged I had even shown up. At some point, I stopped reaching out. I buried myself in work, picked up weekend jobs, saved more money, and told myself I didn't care. But then Mom had a stroke. She was at the grocery store, reaching for a bag of rice, and just collapsed. I got the call from Marcus while I was fixing a walk-in freezer for a diner on the east side of town. I dropped everything and rushed to St. David's, the same hospital where Everly had been born. When I walked into the ICU waiting room, Marcus looked at me like a stranger. Lila wouldn't even meet my eyes. Dean was there, of course, holding her hand like he was the one who lost a mother. My dad sat in the corner, his face hollow. I asked what happened, what the doctor said, if she was going to be okay. Lila mumbled something about blood pressure. Marcus said, "She's stable, but she won't be the same." Dean added, "It's been a tough year for everyone, Caleb. Maybe if you were around more." I snapped. "Don't talk to me like you know me." The whole room froze. My dad stood up slowly and said, "Not now." I walked out. I waited 5 hours in the hallway, hoping someone would invite me in to see her. No one did. At one point, Dean walked past me without saying a word. The next morning, I returned with flowers. The nurse told me Mom was resting. I never got to see her awake. The stroke had affected her speech and memory. She couldn't say my name. A week later, the will changed. I didn't find out until after she passed. Dad called a family meeting. It was awkward from the start. Everyone's sitting around their dining room table like nothing was broken. Dad cleared his throat and pulled out a folder. "Your mother updated her will a few weeks before the stroke. She wanted to make things clear, fair." He read the document in his usual blunt tone. Lila and Marcus were listed as equal beneficiaries to everything: the house, the car, the savings account, even Mom's jewelry. I was left with a framed photo of us from when I was 8. Nothing else. Not even her wedding ring, which she had once promised me to hold for my future wife. "She didn't forget you," Dad said. She thought this made sense. You're doing fine on your own." I looked around the table and realized no one was surprised. Not even Lila, whose eyes were fixed on the table like it had something deeply interesting to say. I stood up, didn't say a word, walked out. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't work the next day. I just sat at home staring at that old photo in a wooden frame, wondering how I became a guest star in my own family. And then I made a decision. If they wanted me out, I'd give them exactly what they wanted, except not in the way they expected, because I knew things they didn't. Things about Dean. Things about the money. Things that, if revealed, would tear everything apart. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to let the truth walk in first.
I never liked Dean from the start, but I kept my distance because family was family, right? But after Mom passed and the will cut me out, I started digging. I talked to a few old friends of Dad's, the ones who'd known him before Dean ever came along. And one name kept coming up: Dean's shady business deals. At first, I thought maybe it was just talk, jealousy, or sour grapes. But as I looked deeper, things didn't add up. Dean had started buying up property around Austin, like he was trying to build an empire overnight. But his declared income was barely enough for a modest house. Something was off. I went online, digging through public records and tax filings. I found liens, suspicious transfers, and a pattern of companies popping up and disappearing. It was almost like a shell game. Then I found it. A bank statement someone had carelessly left accessible through a weak online security hole. It showed Dean transferring large sums of money to an offshore account. I printed everything and saved copies on my encrypted drives. I wasn't planning on confronting Dean directly just yet. I needed proof, more leverage. So I reached out quietly to a family lawyer I had once helped with HVAC repairs. She agreed to take a look for free after I explained the situation. Together, we started piecing the puzzle. Meanwhile, Lila was spiraling. She had stopped calling, stopped posting pictures of Everly, and rumors were swirling in the neighborhood about Dean's temper getting worse. But none of my family cared. They were too busy fawning over the image Dean projected. One night, I got a call from Lila, her voice trembling, whispering that Dean had been arrested for assault but was bailed out with no charges pressed yet. I told her I was coming to get her in Everly, but she said no. She was scared. That was the moment I realized I was the only one who saw through the perfect facade. The family that chose Dean over me was blind to the truth. So I started planning. I gathered documents, recordings, testimonies from neighbors and friends who had seen Dean's true colors. I contacted the local news station anonymously. I set up a meeting with my lawyer to prepare a case that would not only challenge the will, but expose Dean for the fraud and abuse he was hiding behind. I wasn't doing this just for me. I was doing it for Lila, for Everly, and for the memory of Mom, who deserved better than to have her legacy stolen by a con artist. The hardest part was keeping this plan secret. Every time I saw Marcus, he acted like nothing was wrong, like I was the outsider causing trouble. But I wasn't backing down. I was coming back. Stronger, smarter, ready to show them all that family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty, truth, and respect. And Dean? He thought he could hide everything, but he was wrong.
The days after I contacted the news station and lawyer felt like I was walking a tightrope over a canyon. Every morning I woke up half expecting a call from Lila, begging me to stop, or from Marcus warning me to back off, but no one called. Instead, the silence grew heavier, the distance wider. Dean kept up his public charm offensive, photos on social media, smiling with Everly, hosting barbecues, making grand gestures that fooled everyone except me. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. The lawyer told me the documents I'd gathered were solid, but she warned me this fight wouldn't be easy. Dean had deep pockets, connections, and a family that believed in his version of reality more than mine. Still, I wasn't intimidated. I started meeting with journalists, handing over evidence piece by piece. I wasn't just exposing Dean's financial fraud, I was exposing the truth about who he really was. The man who had stolen my sister's joy, manipulated my parents, and tried to erase me from their lives. Slowly, the community started to talk. Neighbors who had been quiet suddenly called me with stories. Dean's temper, the late-night screaming, the times he showed up at family gatherings drunk and angry. One neighbor even sent me a video of Dean smashing a window during a fight. I shared these with the reporter, who promised to dig deeper. At family gatherings, the tension was unbearable. Mom's funeral was the last straw. Dean monopolized the eulogy, praising himself for being the rock the family needed, while I sat quietly, knowing the real story. Marcus avoided my gaze, Lila barely spoke. But then, in an unexpected moment, Lila approached me. "Caleb," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to say no." We talked for hours that night, and she finally agreed to leave Dean's house. I offered her and Everly to stay with me as long as they needed. That was the turning point. From that moment on, my family started to see the cracks in Dean's mask. The news report aired a week later, featuring interviews, documents, and testimonies. It hit like a bombshell.
My parents called me, hesitant and shaken. Marcus apologized for ignoring me. Lila thanked me for saving her. Dean vanished from social media and stopped answering calls. I realized that revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about reclaiming what was stolen. My family wasn't perfect, and maybe they made mistakes, but standing up for truth and loyalty brought us back together in ways I never expected. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew one thing. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was family.
The aftermath of the news report was a whirlwind that swept through my life and my family's like a storm long overdue. Dean's carefully crafted world came crashing down under the weight of truth and exposure. The local police reopened investigations into his financial dealings and the allegations of abuse, while the community that had once turned a blind eye started to distance themselves from the man who had deceived them. My parents, shell-shocked and deeply hurt by their own blindness, began to see things differently. Our family gatherings, once a source of tension and cold shoulders, slowly transformed into moments of healing. Marcus, who had been distant and angry with me for so long, finally broke down one evening, admitting that he had been scared to confront the truth and afraid of losing the family he thought he knew. Lila, now free from Dean's shadow, began to rebuild her life and her relationship with her daughter Everly, who quickly bonded with me as her protective uncle. I became more than just the fixer or the reliable one. I became the voice that refused to be silenced. But justice wasn't without its scars. Dean fought back with lawsuits and threats, trying to intimidate me and the journalists who had stood by the story. There were moments of doubt, nights when I wondered if it was worth it. But every time I looked at the framed photo of Mom I'd kept all these years, I found the strength to keep going. What started as a painful story of being cast aside turned into a lesson about what family truly means. It's not about blood or inheritance, but about loyalty, truth, and standing up for each other, even when it's hard. The irony that stings the most is that the family I thought had chosen Dean over me actually reminded me what I was worth. A man who won't be forgotten, a brother who never gave up. In the end, I didn't just get back what was stolen, I gained a new kind of family. One built on honesty and love, even if it was harder to come by. And that made all the difference.